Hello，听得到吗？Hello，听得到吗？听得到吗？哎，你听得到我吗？哎，为什么我听不到你呢？等一下，
哦，解除静音了，刚才那个静音了，不好意思。
啊，我现在把那个，呃，看你那边可以录的吧？我没有限定，
哦，好，我看一下啊，
对，
录像就行是吧？哦，好，
你应该可以录的。
好，嗯，
哦，行，
请向主持人申请会议录制权限。
哦，那你申请，然后我就 admit 就好了。
OK，
然后待会儿我介绍一下，因为我没有跟他说太多，我只说会在央视播，然后我待会儿小介绍一下，完了我就说你先提问，然后我们再补充。那个
OK，
这是谁在 unmute？哎，是那个王璇吗？M 是王璇吗？
不知道他又退出了，我看一下他是在微信群里说什么话了是吗？
我估计是他。
如有补充问题，我发群里偶尔看一眼。好，
对，刚才站长说要10点钟开会，后来我说我要采访，
啊，
来不及，那就推
好吧，
推到10点半。嗯。
哦，好，辛苦辛苦，
没事儿，
你们那边儿
那你就主问哈，因为那个问题
好的好的，
王璇都发给你了，我会跟
对
补充一点就好，因为3个人的会议他也只有40分钟，这个我会跟他讲一下，如果快结束的时候，如果你还没有问完，我可以跟他讲，我说我们再进来一下，啊，
哦好。
哎，我看啊，Stuart Star 是那个王璇吗？
sorry，我这个还是显示不行哎，就是还是说得申请
哦，这样，
会议
那我把
录制权。
你设成 host，这样你别退
OK，
出就好了，我设你成 host，所以你要 admit 那个，你要 admit 那个嘉宾哦。现在
OK，
你是 host，
哦，主持人，OK，
所以你现在可以录制
哦，
了，
对，现在就 OK 了，对，
因为这样你就可以录一版，省得到时候又传一遍给你。我自己有一个外录的，但是
哦，
我
好，
我那个外录有回声，所以但是这个也在录制中啊，现在是王
嗯，
源吧？怎么回事？他是不是信号不大好？现在意大利还好吧？疫情？
对比英国感觉好一些，我们这儿新增目前还停留在1000多这个数字，看
对
法国、西班牙那边都大几千了。嗯，
对对对，英国1200。
哦，那还可以。现在就是度假回去的人比较可怕，就海岛上的那种聚集感染的比较多。
对对对，这个
嗯，
Professor Jacob，你查过他的简历吧？他是一个
有，
法官，
对，
就是挺牛的。那个，嗯，主要我不太知道他的立场怎么样，所以你先问着吧。
好的，嗯，
嗯，王璇一会儿上一会儿下的，怎么回事？
那到时候我录出来的是我们3个都在屏幕里吗？
哦，
就是那个，
你在右上角，你看到上面有1、2、3、3杠，看到了吗？右上角就是有个 gallery view，你看到吗？右上
啊
角有个
，Gallery View，
gallery view，
对，
可以设置成那个演讲者模式，就谁讲话是谁，这样就没有
哦，
大家。当然，如果你需要我们都退出，我可以退出，这样就剩下你和他，当然就看你了。嗯，然后
哦，
如果你还没有加我微信吧，加了吗？
加
你
了加了，
你加了，如果你需要我退出，我也可以退出。然后你差不多你在微信里通知我一下，我再进来也可以。但这样只有你录了一个版本，所以你要录下来。
哦，那还是都在里头比较好。
都在，
就是我给你看一下，我拍一下现在的这个我的界面，然后你觉得就是我在这个状况下持续录制应该就 OK 是吧？
就是你不要有我们在那个屏幕里，光就是你演讲者，就是谁说
没关系，
话出现谁，就是你看，我看啊，就是右上角，
我给你
对，
拍一下啊，
嗯，
我发微信给你看一
对你
下。
发一个微信给我，然后我估计他快来了，
嗯，好，我会看着的。他那个，
听
诶，喂，
他说话，
听不见说话，
哦，他说的。哎，他来了，你一定要 admit，哎，不是，他其实，诶，
他没
丢了，
没发。
你再发给我了吗？
哦，现在给你稍等啊，我找不到，我看一下，我应该加了你的微信，我还没加。
哦，那你快加。Anyway，
好，
我添加，现在添加。然后
就这个视图就 OK 是吗？我现在发给你的那个。
你看，哦，这个不要有我们的视图。你看我现在呼你，然后我告诉你怎么做啊，就是等一下，
好，
你接收，
哦，
你接收一下
好，但是它那个
啊，你接收，然后你看这上面有一个 Gallery View，然后你可以点开，有3个人，再点开是这个，再点开，哎，这里不是有3个，有一格吗？看见吗？我一点就人全消失了。
OK，sorry，Jack。
你看，这是3个人的界面，然后你再点一次是变成1个人的界面。
I'm unmuted.
Oh, hi, Professor
Hi.
Jacob. Oh, sorry. Let me switch off one of audio channel. Hi, Professor Jacob. You will find this is Julie. Yeah, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet
I
you.
used to live in UCL campus. My husband graduated from UCL.
Oh,
And his major is in intellectual property law.
can I teach him?
Yeah, he was, but he wasn't very good at. So he asked me to ask you some question anyway. And my colleague Deng, he is working in Italy. He is a CCTV reporter based in Rome. Is it Rome?
Right.
Yeah.
Buongiorno.
Jacob, nice to meet you.
And another colleague, I think is Xuan. Xuan is online as well. So we'll, Mr. Deng, will ask you firstly, and then we'll see if we can add on any question. I hope we won't. All right. So then it's your floor. Then, okay.
Okay. Good morning, Sir Robin Jacob. It's a pleasure for us to do this interview with you. And we know that recently we're focusing on the controversies about TikTok, the video sharing network service owned by a Chinese technology company. And the Trump administration ordered this company to divest the ownership of the application in the United States. And ByteDance agreed to do so not only in the United States, but also in the New Zealand and some other countries. At the same time, we know that in the US, there's a CLOUD Act, the so-called Clarifying Law for Overseas Use of Data Act, enacted in the 2018. So in your opinion, is this forced divestment of TikTok linked to this CLOUD Act? If not, what is the legal basis of this order by the US government? Thank you.
I really can't help on that. I mean, this is US law. Whether the thing is based on security or based on protectionism is an open question as far as I'm concerned. I predicted some time ago that the powerful rise of Chinese technology might be seen as a threat by the United States. And historically, the United States has been a very protectionist country. And doesn't really, open trade is not one of their strong points. I mean, we've seen it in 1930s, we've seen it in the 1940s, 50s. I mean, these are very ancient traditions. You know, you're in China, you understand these things. But actually, the details of TikTok, I don't know at all. So I can't help on that.
Okay, so do you think this kind of approach is linked to the some kind of national security, because it has long been the excuse of the Chinese US government to intervene in the mergers and acquisitions of companies? So
I
you think
really
it's a rare case?
I don't know. I don't know what the true position is.
Okay.
And I mean, I have a general view that the claim of security, whether it's TikTok or Huawei or whatever, if it is possible to put in secret things into this equipment which cannot be found by the great American technology companies, then probably Huawei is doing it. And probably the American companies are doing it too. They all do it or they don't do it. I think it's as simple as that. It's in the nature of big governments to get involved. And if Huawei can do it, Intel can do it, Qualcomm can do it. If they can't, they can't. That's my own private view.
I understand. Thank you. And from your professional view, from the law.
From the law, I have no legal views of any kind.
Okay.
I just don't know enough about it. It's not my. I mean, I'm a patent lawyer mainly. I know a bit about competition law, European competition law, American competition law, not at all. And as for secrecy law, not at all. Either here or there.
Okay, so let's return to a question of maybe from the point of the law. So what is explanation of the data's sovereignty, and what are the kinds of data that can be considered as part of a nation's sovereignty? As we can see now, a large amount of personal data are owned by different kinds of social platforms. In this case, is there any contradiction between the extraterritorial powers of this kind of owner of data and the data sovereignty in your eyes?
I don't think so. I think it's not so much a question of sovereignty, it's just private companies using their private company power. Whether they should be allowed to is another question. Whether the growth of these companies is something that nobody's ever... The nearest parallel we have is back at the end of the 19th century when they created antitrust law in the United States. Hugely powerful companies, and they created antitrust law then. But the one rule they haven't created, which I rather think may be considered, ought to be considered, is that you don't say that somebody has broken antitrust law. You simply say your company is too big and must be broken up because it is too big. Just as simple as that. You become more powerful than the state. You become more powerful and nobody can ever get in now. So maybe these big banks of data have to be opened up, but that's a big political question, a big question for the future of mankind, really, as to what we're going to do with these huge data banks. Whether they can be under the control of private people or governments, or they should not be as big in the first place. I don't know the answers to these questions. I think we should be asking them, though.
Okay. As for we know that nowadays, for the United States, there is a combination of series of data acts set in advance compared to the other countries, and the US has a technological leading role in the world. And so this kind of two facts benefit is long-arm jurisdiction. So what are the data privileges of the United States in juridical field? And what are your suggestions to countries and China to deal with this situation?
I'm afraid this is almost beyond my pay grade to answer those questions. I mean, I thought you were going to ask me about standard essential patents and the recent Supreme Court case. But these wider questions, I haven't really. They're not really my area, so I'm going to back off.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know enough about the technology of exactly what's involved, and I certainly don't know enough about the politics and the competition laws and other laws of different countries, particularly the United States and so on, and what their laws should be. I can't really say they're wrong because I don't know. I don't know what they are. I'm sorry, but it's not my area.
Okay, I understand. So I don't know whether my colleagues
I mean, Julie sent me a question. She said I was going to be asking about Huawei, the Supreme Court case. That's what I thought.
Just follow. Sorry, just follow the what you mentioned. You said the legislation thing. I would like to see if Trump's administration accuse Huawei or TikTok or WeChat, any companies, what are their duty or proof? I mean, for TikTok, do they need to, what will they need to prove? Will they need to? No?
I don't know, Julie. I don't know. We do know that TikTok is going to court against it. So maybe the Trump administration is acting outside its powers. But I don't know what you have to prove or anything.
if they said they didn't do anything and if they have proof, but Trump administration still accuse them, you still have the risk because you are headquartered in China, and you have to stick to the Chinese law to cooperate with the security department. So if they put that risk or threat as an accusation, do you think it's fair for the private company? And is it quite hard for the company to prove they are innocent?
Well, it may be that they haven't cooperated with the Chinese, but that law is not a helpful law. I mean, that is what Trump will rely on, and he's got a bit of a point there, hasn't he? If I mean, in expressly, there is nothing like that in Western laws.
And also,
there is whether, nevertheless, companies do cooperate with governments. I don't know. If Intel. I would think Intel and Qualcomm and the other big American companies do talk to the CIA.
Yeah, that is what I'm asking. So do you think?
But they haven't a law saying they've got to.
All right. So if even in Western companies, they need to cooperate with security.
I don't know they need to. I don't know what happens. I mean, I'm just guessing, but I'm just as guessing as a citizen, not as a lawyer.
Mm-hmm. And think about a lot of accusation on Chinese company. They said the Chinese company stole the IP products or anything for information from Western companies. But for that, do they have? Is there any law to protect from doing anything, or they just loophole in the legislation? Do you think they already have an existed law there?
Well, I do say this. I don't know. I mean, I don't know what's going on, but I do say that China's attitude to intellectual property has completely changed in the last 30 years. And I know some of the Chinese judges, and I think their standards are really rather good, higher than average in around the world, which is quite extraordinary. To have come from a country which didn't have a patent system in the 1980s. And it was Deng Xiaoping who really realized that this system, a very strange system. It's a system which says you have laws that you can stop people doing things, and that actually creates more things to do. It's counterintuitive. Many people don't like patent systems for that reason. Competition lawyers don't. But China has strengthened its intellectual property over the years and is continuing to do so. Some of the accusations against China about stealing intellectual property are simply false. Sometimes Chinese companies use an invention which was patented in other countries and wasn't patented in China. They're entitled to. The protection of trade secrets, which is one of the things that really bothers, it's the other really big one that bothers people. I mean, trademarks is easy. Counterfeiting is counterfeiting wherever it is. And how efficient you are at stopping it is not easy, either in the West or in the East. And not just China, but any country. But so put trademarks aside. Trade secrets are a very difficult area of law. The law is quite simple. You mustn't take people's trade secrets. That's what you say. And that's true in China too. But making it work is actually very difficult. As a practical matter, you have to have a court system that can deal with it, which is not easy. And Europe had to upgrade its system and create a directive for controlling, for upgrading trade secret law in many countries. Not so much in my country. We'd pretty well sorted it. But the Europeans had to do it. In some countries, for example, if you went to court to protect your trade secret, in some countries you had to disclose your trade secret to go to court. Well, it's stupid. But if you can't disclose the trade secret, so you run a legal procedure where the trade secret doesn't come out into the open. How then does it work? How can you find out what the defendant's doing? He says what he's doing is a trade secret. I'm not doing what you do, but I have a trade secret. I mean, I've seen some bad cases where Chinese companies, 20 years ago maybe now, were cheating in various ways. But then I've seen that from other countries too, American companies. The law of trade secrets is a very difficult law to police. That's what it boils down to. And so you can see a reluctance for an American company to disclose something in China, which might, unless they really trust the people. And in the end, that's the only way you can protect trade secrets, is by trusting, I think. Once we did an event at UCL about 6-7 years ago, maybe your husband even went to it, about protecting trade secrets with criminal law. And we had a man from the Criminal Bar Association, a leading criminal lawyer. And he said, the only way you can protect trade secrets is to glue up all the ports on all the company computers, so nobody can put a stick in, and then have everything tracked so you can see it's gone by, if it's gone electronically over the internet.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So I mean that and that's true all the time. On the other hand, trade secrets are not always as big as sometimes they are portrayed. Sometimes trade secrets really consist of something rather different, which is a collection of people who know how to do something. Mm-hmm. And yes, in theory, you could find out and ask each one, but in fact, it's skills rather than knowledge.
Mm. So
a really well-working company has a lot of skills in its workforce, and that's not so easy to take away. Mm. A very, very, very good and big example is a New Zealand company. It's an Australian company, but based in Tasmania. And it was founded by a remarkable man who started off life as a fisherman, and it's catamarans, big car-carrying catamarans. And when I went there and saw them a few years ago, they made half the catamarans in the world, and they had extremely big skills in making things of aluminium. And they were local, because they all lived in Tasmania. They weren't even in the main Australia. And Korean companies, a big shipbuilding, they wanted to get hold, and they couldn't do it, because it was the group of people who had the skills. So the law of trade secrets is sometimes a good blunt one, when they just go and take the plans or take the formula which they know works. Then the law of trade secrets is successful, but it can't protect skills. And that's another area of trade secret law, which is the difference between a trade secret and just skills. Mm. That's a very mucky area indeed. I hated trade secret cases when I was a judge, and I hated them even more when I was a lawyer. They were really difficult cases to do.
So you must see some cases in the Western countries.
Oh yes.
They purchased a company, they took over a company, but they also took over the skills, or intellectual property, but they thought it was skill rather than trade secret, isn't it?
Yes, one time you buy a company for the employees. I mean, groups of human beings get to be very good, like football teams. I mean, there aren't any trade secrets in football, but there's a bunch of skills. That's why Liverpool are the champions.
Interesting. But the thing is, if the American government administration, they should or can intervene in such a kind of legal cases by using the administrative power rather than through the legal aids or legal tools.
Yes, they do. I mean, and again, whether that's justified or not in any particular case, I have no idea.
Mm. All right. For the Huawei case, the Supreme Court dismissed the Huawei and ZTE patent appeals.
Yes.
From your point, do you think it's reasonable?
There's very different aspects of the case. There's a whole lot of aspects of the case. I mean, this is an area I do know about. First of all, I think they were basically right.
Mhm.
And I'm not sorry either, because not because I'm a nationalist or anything like that, but I think the English court has the best mechanism for fixing the appropriate royalty rate for standard essential patents, because they go into it best. Better still is actually some international tribunal. There isn't such a one. So I think the rates that were fixed, they were much higher than they were fixed in America, although the judge there has been reversed by the Ninth Circuit and it's not yet been settled. But actually, what the world needs is an arbitration system for fixing these rates. They may be different in different areas. It may be cheaper in China, it generally is. Big bulk orders and so on, and probably cheaper in India too. But basically, the rates are not bad. I mean, if somebody's done a calculation, if you're going to, they're very excited about 5G for motor cars. And you buy a motor car, it lasts about 10, 12 years. If you were told, well, would you like to have a guess of how much you would pay for a self-driving motor car for the IP involved, for the patents, all the patents from all the companies in the world? What do you reckon it would be? Any idea?
No idea, but
Let me give you a startling figure.
Mhm.
About the cost of a parking ticket. Not more than $20 US for the entire life of the car.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm. And it's much the same with a mobile phone. The technology involved, whatever you pay the company's price. You pay an Apple price for the lovely design. But Apple are only paying around about $20 for all the patents in it.
Mm-hmm. Now they are, Huawei argued, actually they said the jurisdiction should be in China rather than in UK.
They did. And that still could happen. The UK said, well, the trouble is that China won't deal with it at the moment. Things might be different if Chinese court said, yes, we can deal with it. We say we can, and it's a perfectly standard English law, actually. Nothing very special about it. Particularly because nobody else will. The Chinese court wouldn't fix the rate for royalty for outside China at the moment. They haven't. It's not finally decided. It's certainly not been decided by the Supreme Court. But actually, I don't think that the Chinese courts are the best place either. It should be arbitration. And the value and importance of arbitration is, I think it should be a 5-person panel, not a 3. Not because you need 5 to do the job, but 5 people from different countries. That's the big thing, because that gives it an acceptability. The Japanese, and I'm on the panel of the Japanese Patent Office, have created a special arbitral body. You don't have to use that. There are, of course, many international arbitration associations, the ICC and the London Court of International Arbitration, the Singapore, Hong Kong. There's places you could go. But the importance is not really the place you go to, but the panel. And there have been quite a lot of arbitrations, big arbitrations. LTE against Nokia. Samsung have been involved in some arbitrations. I don't know the detail. One of the things, you never know the details, but some of these have had some publicity. And when they have, you get to hear the result. And by and large, they've worked. And they produce a result, and they can work faster than courts. They have a better machinery for dealing with it than courts. So one of the problems of the Chinese court machinery is not very satisfactory for this kind of case because it doesn't have discovery in the same way as a common law court. The Chinese system is originally based on German system.
And another question about the digital service tax. Do you think France should add on the digital service tax on the American companies? But the American company, they said, no, you shouldn't do that. What's this?
I have some sympathy with the French position, but it's a personal position. It's not a legal position.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the problems of these big companies is the whole of the taxation system and how it applies to them. For example, a lot of complaints that Amazon in the UK is not actually in the UK. The company is a Luxembourg company, and Luxembourg is a tax haven, and that's why they're there. You simply say, well, many of these things may have to move to a local tax.
Mm-hmm.
If you buy something online, it should be on exactly the same amount of tax as if you went into the shop and bought it.
Mm-hmm. All right. For the Donald Trump just said in his announcement in election, he said he wants to do decoupling from China in a lot of areas. It's not the original code, but he said rough meaning in that. So do you believe that decoupling in digital area will happen? If that happen, what's the influence in your area?
Yeah, well, let's back up. The international cooperation of companies which came from nothing and became big companies has been a huge success for the world. And China played a big part in that. So did other countries. A little country like Finland did with Nokia, and Sweden with Ericsson. It has been the competition between those companies, coupled with their cooperation between them, which has produced the internet as we know it, and is producing 5G, and will go on and produce more stuff. Things that have threatened that by breaking it up are, I think, divisive and bad for humanity. I regret the walls that China has put up. You can't really use Google in China and so on. I think that's a mistake, a Chinese mistake. And to some extent, what the Americans are doing and making the same mistake. And it's not good for anybody. Maybe, a sensible thing to be saying, we'll go to China and say, well, look, we won't put up barriers if you take yours down. So it's a political question. And I think the world would be better if that's what happened. I mean, there are political reasons why the Chinese put those in. I regret those political reasons. I'm not sure that the China of 15 years ago would have done that. Deng Xiaoping almost certainly wasn't a great man. So China, your lives have been completely changed by that man.
Yeah, sure. So I would like to know, in your opinion, what is the difference between this limited access in China mainland to the Google and other sites, and this approach by the Trump administration to the TikTok?
Oh, it's much bigger. It's much bigger than the Chinese restrictions. But I do think it's driven out of American fear of being overtaken by China, which may have some justification. Because you're doing well. I don't fear it. That's not the way to think. You say, well, all right, you better get your act together better. Somebody once in America complained about all these Americans buying German cars, BMWs and Porsche and Mercedes and so on. And one of the Germans replied, well, why don't you make better cars? And there you are. You've got companies that don't pay, and they should be paying in China, quite a lot of little companies, and even one or two big ones, not paying standard essential royalties at all. And I regret that. And I would think the Chinese government would be better to say, come on, boys, you've got to pay. And the Chinese courts should be willing to uphold actions in the same way as Western courts are upholding actions against people who won't pay. But some big Chinese companies are paying and well settled. Huawei's paying, Xiaomi's paying. I mean, they've settled. They settle just like any other company in the world. And I would like to see more of that, a civilized world, and not a governments trying to do protectionism one way or the other.
All right.
But I'm a bit old-fashioned. I grew up in the post-world, in the immediate post-war area where everything had been divided and no good came of it. And cooperation is one of our protections against ourselves in much bigger fields like war.
So the war is starting.
Well, that's one of my worries.
Okay. So any question? Dan, do you want to ask, or Xuan?
I think I'm done with my questions.
All right. Okay. So thank you very much, Jacob, Professor Jacob. Thank you.
Okay.
I'll let you know what happened later, and hope we keep in touch. And we can.
Anything you're going to write, I wouldn't mind seeing it just in case it's wrong in some way or other. If you can send it to me first.
All right. So I will send any if we can put it on a document, and I will send you.
Thank you very much.
Sorry, Sir Jacob. Could I ask the last question? I've forgotten one question.
Okay. Yeah.
So compared to the privileged position of the US in the technology and the market share, do you think that the different sorts of data act in the other countries can play as the first line to protect themselves?
No, not much. No, I think if you're going to catch up with the Americans, you've got to catch up with the Americans. I mean, you have done in China. I mean, you're young. So when you're an old man, you may look back and say, "Good Lord, was that the old China?" I can't imagine how China was nothing. I went to Shanghai in 1986. You could not imagine what it was like. I went there because my father was born and brought up in Shanghai, and I took him back there. He came to England in 1926, to University College London, as a matter of fact. He never went back until I took him back in 1986, 60 years later. And we found his old school, but Shanghai had hardly any new buildings. It hadn't had any paint on the buildings since before the war. Nearly everything was bicycles. The pollution was terrible, smoke. We went on the roads. We went out on the roads. We went to Hangzhou and Suzhou, and the roads were terrible. We came by train from Hangzhou. It was an old-fashioned steam train doing maybe 30, 40 miles an hour.
Sorry, Sir Jacob, maybe the time is running out.
Okay.
We have a
That's
very
China 30 years ago.
For the European Union, do you think that the GDPR can play some kind of?
I think it has played a part. Yes, it has. It's helped in some sort of degrees of privacy. It's really made people more conscious of it, I think, more than anything else. Okay, folks.
Okay, thank you.
Nice to talk to you.
All right. So if you have any question, we will ask you, and then we can make another appointment. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you. Okay, bye.
And lovely to share your experience in China.
Bye.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Professor.
Thank you.
Good day.
可以吗？结束了。
嗯，
OK。
好。